Welcome to my channel. My name is Krista Llewellyn and I am a makeup artist and a makeup educator. And today we're going to be doing a little bit of sculpting. So I have a project coming up where I have to make a character look like Kratos from God of War. The three scars that we're going to be focusing on today are he has a scar that goes across his eye, and then he has a really big scar on his stomach. So we're going to be doing that. That's more of like a keloid scar. There's a lot more texture in there. And then finally, you probably can't really see it on this camera, but he has some scarring around his forearm, a sculpt of that as well. We're going to be doing mostly like a little time-lapse version of it, and then I'll be talking over my process. But the goal for these guys is going to be sculpting them and then molding them and running them as prosthetics transfers. I want to start out with prosthetics transfers first, just because they're a little bit, I wouldn't say easier to make, they're probably about the same workload as doing a silicone prosthetic. I find that they are a little bit quicker to apply and they sort of stick on a little bit longer than a silicone prosthetic just because they're all glue. And this is a character that's going to be walking around and interacting with a bunch of people, and we won't really have time to like go in and do a ton of touch-ups. So I want to make sure that they're foolproof. So that's the plan, and you're going to follow me along on this journey. Let's go. So one quick thing that I forgot to mention in the intro is because the forearm scar is going to be wrapping around the arm, we don't actually want to do it in a straight line or anything like that. So what I did is I actually traced out my boyfriend's like bicep area just so that I could have an approximate size and shape for where I want the scar to be. And I'm going to transfer that onto my block. Yeah, I just forgot to say that in the intro, and I figured that was important information. Let's start. I'm gonna prep the canvas a little bit by cleaning it off, and then I'm going to draw out approximate shape and how big I want things to go, and then throw down some clay. Let's do it.
I transferred that over to the surface area and then I started sculpting. I started with a small scar first, that way I can, just warm up a little bit on my sculpting because it had been a while when I started this project. And then I moved on to the chain scar. This one took a little bit more finessing. I had to really look at the detail of things. It looked like it had these little like burrs that like came off of the chain, so I added those into them. And I added out just like the shapes first with little noodles, and then I pressed it into the board, sculpted everything down, got it really nice and flat so that it looked mostly like a raised scar instead of, just some clay that's like sitting on top of the skin. You don't want it to look like that. And then I went through and textured everything to have some skin texture, some of that line texture, and I also would burn it with a little bit of a torch. That way it got a nice like melted look to it. Really sink it into the skin. And then because that chain scar actually didn't take up too much space, and I ended up only doing that upper layer of the chain, I didn't end up doing the 2 layers of it. I ended up doing the main belly scar in the middle of that board as well, so that I was able to do it all in one mold. So with the belly scar, it's the same process. You put a bunch of clay down, you mashed it into the board, even it out, add in your texture. Again, I went in with a little bit of a torch to get that sort of melted texture. And now I'm going to add some walls around the each individual scar. These are going to be like a little bit of a trench for you to push your material into. That way you have nice thin edges. Then I'm going to cut out some boards so that I can glue them around to create our mold walls. And I hot glued those to my board. I didn't want to overly use material, so I tried to do it as close as I could while also leaving a little bit of surface area around. So when you are actually running your transfers and you have the material in them and the acetate paper on top of it, then the surrounding areas around those trenches are going to be important to make sure that everything is level. And then I started weighing out my materials. So you will notice in the video that the materials that I'm weighing out here don't actually match the mold that comes about later. I accidentally purchased Gel 10 instead of Gel 25, and Gel 10 is a much softer silicone than Gel 25 is. I ended up needing to go and buy a hardener for my platinum-based silicone, which is what I end up doing. I did also add in the PTM mold release. That really helps so that you don't have to add mold release every single time that you run a transfer. It's already intrinsically in the mold. And what I'm doing here is called a high pour. You want to pour the material as high up as possible, and that helps to pop any air bubbles. And there is the actual mold that I made. As you can see, it is blue, unlike the clear silicone that I was doing before. And this one is a much denser silicone, so it is going to be much better for running our prostate transfers. I charged it in the freezer first to activate that mold release, and then I'm going to go in with the PT material and just smush it into the mold itself. Next, we are going to put down our acetate paper and flatten all of the material out. Luckily with the PT material, both sides of the acetate paper are released. If you are buying regular acetate paper, make sure to check which side has the release agent on it. And then these will go into the freezer until they fully freeze, and you'll be able to see a color difference. Once they're frozen, you'll take off that ring around them, and then cut and pop them into a dehydrator. I'm using a very basic food dehydrator, which probably takes a little bit longer than like an industrial food dehydrator, but this one works fine. You just have to wait a little bit longer, especially for some of the bigger ones. And again, you'll be able to see a color difference when things are fully dehydrated. You won't be able to see that soft pink of the material. It will be more of a flesh toned once it's fully dehydrated. And these are all the dehydrated products. And then I go in and pin them onto a little piece of cardboard or some sort of, presentation board, anything that you can pin into. And that way it separates the boards from stacking on top of each other because of those pins. And this is how I packed them for the gig. So here are some pictures and a quick little video that I took during the project, because of course I forgot to film the actual application process for you guys. But in light of that, I'm going to do an application of that afterwards. So these are the leftover scars that I had because I made too many. It's always good to make some extras just in case anything happens with the prosthetics on the day. So I had a bunch of extra stuff that I could use. And I'm going to apply one of these small scars for you guys today. So here is that small scar. I'm going to take some Q-tips and some 99% alcohol and go ahead and clean up those edges that are around. So sometimes the material will leave a tiny little bit of a film right where you're supposed to have scraped everything off. And so to make it not have any edges, you just want to go through with a Q-tip and some 99% alcohol and gently remove that little bit of film, like so. Then I'm going to take some Prozaid and a cut up sponge. And you're going to stipple on the Prozaid all over the piece, and a little bit around it too. That way it will fully stick to our transfer paper. And you want to wait for it to dry. Here's our transfer paper. It's from PT Material. They make it pretty foolproof in that there's writing on one side. So the side that you want to put it on is on that clear side there. You absolutely don't want to put it onto the other side that has the writing. If you do that, you will never get your transfer back, and you'll just have to throw it away at that point. So now I'm going to take some scissors, and I'm going to cut at pretty close to the prosthetic itself. I'm going to leave about 1/8 of an inch of a halo around everything. And I'm going to separate these two because I'm only going to use one part of this scar. Now I'm going to take that film off of the acrylic paper there. and just slap it onto the skin. And this works very much like a temporary tattoo, where you take some water and you just spray the heck out of it. You want to make sure that it gets nice and saturated. And I'm using a paper towel, but you can also use a sponge, you can use a powder puff, any instrument that is your preference to pat in that water to really make sure you fully saturate the water slide paper. And you will see that it is ready when it kind of just slides off like it did right there. And you can pull it off, sort of press it in, make sure it's fully into the skin. And then I'm going to take some of that 99% alcohol and just hit a few of the edges down. Any little balls of the material you can just work off with that 99% alcohol. And I'm going to add a little bit of a no color powder to it. It is made entirely out of glue, so you do have to powder it down a little bit. Then to get rid of any of that like powder residue, I'm just going to take a little bit of water and stipple that up. And next we're going to paint it. So I'm going to take my European Body Art Endura Skin palette, and I'm going to mix a mauve color, because especially on my skin tone, scars like this will tend to be a little bit more pink or mauve. You don't want it to be overly saturated with the color. You do want a nice thin wash. And then you can layer in some depth into it with some deeper colors like I am here. Next, I'm just going to take a little bit of skin tone and go around the edge, because it does have a little bit of a halo of white from the powder still. Then I'm going to press everything in with my sponge. A little dust of powder as well. And I thought I needed something a little extra, so I took some really light skin tone and did a bit of texturing on top. And that's the finished one. There you go. So just as a little wrap up of things, here is the prosthetics transfer application. You can also seal it with any of your favorite sealers. I like Pro Seal or the Kryolan's Fix-It spray. You can also powder it as well. You may have to powder it throughout the day just because it is entirely made out of glue. So it might get a little tacky throughout the day. So you do want to keep an eye on that just in case there's any like little bits of fuzz or fabric that like get stuck on there. I do know of someone who does prosthetic transfers with a Baldy's like sheet on top of it so that it avoids that, which I want to play around with and try one of these days. But for now, this was how I normally do my transfer process. If you have any questions, go ahead and leave a comment below. I would really like to try to do more of these like full tutorials of things, especially for prosthetic transfers. I think it's really nice because you can pretty easily make these at home. Sometimes with like silicone, you have to obviously be in a nice aerated area for the Baldies because you don't want to be spraying Baldies everywhere. And then for foam latex, you obviously have to have a proper oven to cook foam latex. So prosthetic transfers, while you can only do like little tiny things like injuries and things like that, it is a nice, easy at-home thing to do to make custom prosthetics. And again, I'm gonna have to be editing this later. Is going to be insane. I'm just gonna be slowly watching this frame fall. But anyways, thank you so much for watching. Again, I hope to do more projects like this. It is a little bit hard for me to fully edit things. I've been shooting a lot of stuff and I've been making a few more short form content stuff. So if you would like to see some of my short form things, you can go over to TikTok at Krista Llewellyn MUA and at Instagram at the same handle. I'll have it be down here as you see that. And aside from that, yeah, let me know if you have any questions. Let me know if you want to see any other processes of making specific prosthetics or making anything in general. Is there something that you wanted to make that you're like, I'm not quite sure how to do this? Maybe I know how to do it and maybe I'll make a video out of it. So go ahead and leave your comment below. Make sure you subscribe to this channel. And yeah, that's it. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.